This video is sponsored by War Thunder. King's Quest speedruns are the most insane adventure game speedruns I've ever seen. You probably have no idea what's going on here, aside from the fact that these people are angry at their keyboards. So today, I'm going to walk you through it all. The crazy movement, exploits, and strats that runners use to dominate King's Quest. Okay, we're not ready for that yet. Let's start with the basics. King's Quest is a parser-driven adventure game from 1984, though runners use the version from 1987. Press the arrow keys to move, type things to interact. You play as Sir Graham, this guy. Your goal is to explore the Kingdom of Daventry and find 3 magic treasures. Then return them to the king, who promptly dies, leaving you to reign in his absence. The game's screens are laid out in a grid, and they loop as if part of a self-contained sphere. When you start walking, you keep walking until you stop yourself, change direction, or run into something. King's Quest has 3 speeds: slow, normal, and fast. Normal and slow are tied to real time, but fast makes the game run as quick as your CPU can motor. Back in the 80s, this worked well enough. But as time went on, if you had a powerful machine, movement in fast mode was near instant. Speedrunners call these zips, and the challenge of routing is figuring out how to most efficiently ping-pong across the screens without dying. For example, you can move from your starting position to this rock by pressing 7172925 on the numpad. But as you might imagine, there's a wide variety of combinations that might work, and it could be more optimal to slow down and readjust. The possibilities are wide open. A few years ago, I put out my first speedrunning history on King's Quest. When we left off, ChuckGrody had earned a 138 in February of 2020. So, let's pick up with his next world record in August of the same year. Before the run begins, Chuck types move rock and then enter. This is because you can repeat your last command by pressing the F3 key. The F3 buffer remembers your input even if you type it before restarting. After restart, Chuck zips to the rock, presses F3 and then enter to move it, and then picks up a knife. He zips to a tree and climbs it to pick up a golden egg. This is slow initially because there's no direct zip there. He gets a nut, opens it, and then zips to a well. Chuck types go pale with 3 spaces in the middle, which sounds weird, but stick with me. Once Graham has gone pale, Chuck types exit, then F3. Anything that you've already typed into the parser will not get overwritten when you use F3, so putting those spaces saves 2 keystrokes. Chuck cuts the rope and gets the bucket, then dives underwater. This is the trickiest part of the run, the well zip. The idea is that you move down and then diagonal up left to get into this hole. Start by moving down at normal speed, then select fast, press enter, and then 7 on the numpad immediately after. If you're too slow, Graham will drown instantly. For that reason, Chuck has his CPU cycles in DOSBox set to 143,799. This number is going to be slightly different for each computer, but for Chuck, any higher means dying, and any lower means moving slower. Inside the cave, Chuck tosses water onto this green blur of a dragon and grabs the mirror, the first of the 3 treasures. Outside, Chuck gets a clover, then zips to this bridge. A troll blocks his way, and Chuck offers him his nut. I mean, the nut from earlier. It's got gold inside of it. Trust me. On the other side of the bridge is an island with an old gnome. To get full points, you have to solve a cipher and guess his name, but if you guess incorrectly 3 times, he gives you a key. Chuck normally guesses that the name is Get Key since he has to type that later anyway and can just press F3 to bring it up again. But Chuck fumbles a little bit and ends up guessing G. Chuck then has to catch an eagle, or a condor, or I'm just going to call it a bird. We're not going to have this argument again. It only has about a 50% chance of showing up, and even when it does, Chuck has to mash the jump button and pray because it's moving quickly at these speeds and you don't always get a hold of it. This takes about 3 seconds in this run, but that can take much longer if you're unlucky. After a ride on the bird, Chuck grabs a magic mushroom. Then Graham falls into this hole. He gives the golden egg from the tree to this rat who was guarding the door. In the next room are a bunch of leprechauns, and because Chuck picked up the clover earlier, they don't bother him. He steals their shield, the second of the 3 treasures. Up these stairs is an opening that we could fit into if we were smaller. Conveniently, we have a Graham shrinking mushroom. Normally, if we have the emulator cycles set high and the speed is fast, the effect wears off instantly and Graham is stuck forever. But if we line ourselves up on the hole and press left so that we're already moving in that direction, Graham will leave the cave the moment we eat the mushroom. Next, Chuck zips to this door and uses the key from the gnome. Inside, he moves up some stairs and makes a safety save. On the next screen, there's an evil dwarf who will steal one of your treasures, and he has about a 60% chance of appearing. If he does, you can't finish the game. Chuck only sees one dwarf and zips up to the clouds where a giant is waiting. The shield protects Graham from the giant, who wanders around until he falls asleep. Chuck then takes the third treasure, a magical chest. The giant's position when he falls asleep is random, so he may be in a place that's easy to zip to. Or, as is the case here, you may have to reduce your speed and slowly walk over. From there, it's a mad dash back to the castle, and Chuck earns a 1:37. World record by 1 second. And if you think this is fast, just wait. Now, I know we've been going at breakneck speed. I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to excite you too much. I've heard more than once that people use my videos to fall asleep. So, for the next 60 seconds, tonight's bedtime story is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder is a free vehicle combat game for PC and consoles. And although you can purchase in-game currency, I did not because I prefer to spend my money on real things, like 20-year-old cardboard boxes. My squad won a match, and I pivoted the camera for a hero shot of my enemy burning. Then I ran into a tree. War Thunder has a realistic damage model. For instance, did you know if a plane gets shot in its wing and its engine catches fire, it's gonna have a hard time flying? If you're looking to and pew 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 pew, War Thunder's got you covered. Play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by using the link in the pinned comment or description. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack. This includes the exclusive Vehicle Decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. About 6 months after Chuck's 137 in January of 2021, a new runner would emerge, and he called himself Santa Claus. When I asked Santa Claus what he did differently from the previous world record, his answer was, everything? To start out with, Santa Claus rerouted every individual zip. His goal? To avoid as many speed changes as possible. Instead of climbing the tree to get the egg, which was slow, Santa Claus found another treasure inside of this stump. You can get some diamonds and show that to the rat instead of the egg. Santa Claus also started typing while walking where the speed changes still happened. Throughout the game, there are baddies who can show up, like an evil wizard or a witch who can take you away. There's also a fairy who tries to be helpful, but her text boxes just end up slowing you down. One thing that Santa Claus rerouted was making sure that he didn't go on any of the witch screens, so that wasn't part of the RNG anymore. One of the cooler things that Santa Claus put into the run was a technique called water walking. Normally, rivers in this game are deadly. There is a swim button, but that only helps you in the lakes and not the rivers. But if Graham is at the very edge of the screen, on the bottom, the left, or the right, he'll just walk over rivers. When I talked to Santa about this, he had this to say. Whoever coded the river trigger areas systematically left out 1 pixel at those 3 edges. You can't water walk across a lake simply because those triggers were mapped properly. Graham's hitbox is 6 pixels wide and 1 pixel tall. Death zones, like the rivers, are only triggered when the entire hitbox is in the zone, so 1 pixel outside of it is sufficient to let Graham cross safely. As an aside, something similar happens at the Dragon. When you toss the water, the game checks if you're close enough, but it doesn't actually measure the distance between you and the Dragon. Instead, it checks if you're inside a rectangle that's too far away. If you aren't in the too far away rectangle, then the water connects. But if you go to the very bottom of the cave, you can get 1 pixel outside the rectangle. That's why zipping down here and then tossing the water works, but standing here doesn't, even though it looks like Graham's about the same distance away from the Dragon. Anyway, remember that bird with all the RNG and the waiting? Water walking meant that Santa could avoid the bird altogether, because the entire point of catching the bird is to go across the river and get to this little otherwise inaccessible area. And finally, I can't let it go unsaid. Santa Claus is just pretty darn fast at typing. Santa's first world record was a 128 on January 25th. He went on a tear the rest of the week, getting better execution, better zips, better routing, better RNG, until a 107 on January 30th. Santa Claus would then take a break until the end of August, when he got a 1-minute run. He wrote that this should have been the sub 1 minute, and that it was the choke of the year. I'm gonna be honest, I don't see anything wrong with this at all, but that's why Santa Claus gets world records, and I don't. On September 10th, after many chokes and other painful late failures, 59.533 seconds. It was an insane world record, one that I didn't think could come down any further. But I was wrong. In May of 2022, a runner named Robb would join, and Robb, well, let me show you. After Robb did what you're about to see, I asked him if he would share his route, because frankly, look at this, there's no way anybody would be able to figure this out from just watching. But instead of just, telling us what he did, he wrote an 11-page illustrated manifesto, not just listing the zips, but explaining his strategies, thought processes, and philosophies on running the game. I love this stuff. Here are the highlights. Instead of getting the mirror first, then the shield, then the chest, Robb switched it up and got the shield first, then the chest, then the mirror. This puts the dwarf and giant RNG earlier. That way, if you get bad RNG, you can reset earlier in the run, and you don't have to waste as much time grinding things out. Also, Robb doesn't save at the dwarf, because if the dwarf's not there, you're wasting a second to save. It takes a little bit to go into the menu and hit enter. And if the dwarf is there, you're adding 2 seconds to save the run. It just doesn't make sense to do it.
The conventional wisdom on the dwarf has been to save on it, right? As an insurance policy. I've always encouraged everyone to run it without saving, essentially. And certainly if you're trying to get competitive times, you almost have to run it without saving.
Another thing that Robb did that seems unintuitive was that he slowed the cycles down to 60k. When you slow the cycles down, you have a bit more control over your character.
I call them fast jumps. The most significant one to me anyway is the one where you hit the castle door from the side. That's when I realized that the game had potential for improvement. But then on to the question, why does it work? What's special about this technique? It built into the game, there's this sort of rate limiter on the keys. There's this built-in upper limit to how fast 2 consecutive keys can be pressed. If you press any 2 consecutive keys faster than this limit, then they will be processed at the rate limit.
The game processes inputs at different rates depending on the in-game speed setting. On fast, this rate is 20 times per second. So every 0.05 seconds, the game goes through the inputs in order, except escape, which gets processed last. For example, here I'm pressing escape and then down right after. Because I entered both inputs within the rate limit, escape registers last, the opposite of what I wanted. Santa Claus told me that, "This one detail has cost me many world records, including what would have been the first ever sub-1. Robb zips, or fast stops as Robb calls them, stop your zip early. Let's take a look at this part where Robb water walks to the gnome. We're zipping right, and then the gnome's text box appears. After we hit enter to make it go away, Graham will normally keep zipping right. In King's Quest, Graham will stop if you press the same direction you're already moving. So, if we press enter and then right, within 0.05 of a second, Graham will stop. To give another example, by doing a fast stop at the giant, Robb has a more direct route in and out. It also puts him in a better position to zip to the giant because you can stop in the middle of the screen. Another thing that Robb did that I had thought about in the past, but honestly, I just thought was too crazy for anybody to do, is that Robb relearned how to type.
King's Quest speedrunning, it sort of reduces to a typing exercise after a while, right? I mean, I think my best idea with the typing was to use like the row of numbers, not the keypad to walk, but the row of numbers above the letters. And in addition, to distribute my fingers so that they land most efficiently on words and numbers and combinations, so that you have like the least movement.
Now let's take one of my favorite commands, get nut. The way you would do it in traditional touch typing means you have to reposition and reach with your fingers, like moving your index finger from N down here up to the U. But what Robb did was reposition his hands, one finger per key, and you can type in one smooth motion once you kind of reprogram your brain. And to round it out, let me just quote from his guide here at the end. Always look for improvements everywhere, and do not assume anything is final. The reason King's Quest 1 never became boring for me is because I was always looking for ways to improve the theory. I've spent no more than about 25% of my time on actually running the game. The remaining time was on reverse engineering and understanding the mechanics or thinking about new strategies. Now, with all that in mind, Robb got his first world record on May 30th, 2022. It was a 59.083.
Yeah, it was kind of cool to have a world record, and I think, the video looked neat, but actually I also remember I wasn't completely happy with it, so making it beautiful, I felt, was almost like the more important thing to me.
And Robb continued this, getting better and better, finding new micro-optimizations, and on June 24th, he got 52 seconds, or 52.1 to be precise.
And at that point, I felt I kind of did what I could do with the game at that point, or at least with that route that I'd found. I ran the game and I enjoyed that, but really, like, what I enjoyed the more from the whole speedrunning experience is looking for optimizations.
And then Robb took it a step further.
Since I also like programming, I realized that King's Quest, this particular game, if you're able to sort of bring the data into the computer, you can run a shortest path algorithm on it to find the route.
Robb wrote a computer program, fed the coordinates of the game into the program, and had the computer look for new zips.
The data is quite accessible in King's Quest because you have these image files, right? And it's not too hard to scan those pixel by pixel. As I kept developing the program, I found more and more significant things, which I've also shared with the community, but those improvements I've never actually run myself.
Now that Robb was brain deep in figuring out how to run the game faster, instead of actually running it himself, the stage was set for some amazing discoveries. Normally, if you approach this bridge, the troll will block your way and you have to give him something that will make him move, like the egg or the gems that we saw earlier. Except that Robb found if you land on this pixel right at the bottom of the bridge, you can walk across. And when I say that Robb found it, it was really Robb's program that found it.
It found this quite a involved pathway which hits this particular pixel, right, that you have to get on and then you walk across the bridge. And the computer found that, but it involves this quite complicated setup where you have to sort of beat around the bush. The character's obscured by some trees and stuff like that, and you can't actually see what's going on.
Another monumental discovery was the back entry into the leprechaun cave. So normally you grab a treasure, get the mushroom, bribe the rat, get the shield, and then use the mushroom to shrink yourself and leave out this cave exit. Now remember, the danger in this is that if you have the speed setting too high and the mushroom timer runs out, Graham gets big again and you can't leave. But if you go to the cave exit and eat the mushroom here, Tiny Graham just never gets big again.
You can see in the game code that they manually remove the mushroom counter in this specific environment. So this is what allows that skip to take place.
So you can enter the cave through the exit to get the shield. There's just one problem. When you go back out, the timer starts again. As Santa Claus told me, if you don't zip on that screen, it's not faster than the normal route through the rat. So, Leprechaun back entry didn't become a thing in actual runs until I figured out that you could do a combination of zipping and slow play on the way out without losing much time. But even that's precise and dangerous and kills a lot of runs. Here's another piece of the puzzle. Robb zips, or what Robb calls fast stops, versus YOLO stops. Fast stops are what we talked about earlier, where you can stop zipping by entering inputs faster than the rate limiter. These are very predictable if done correctly, because keys are only processed every 0.05 seconds. YOLO zips, on the other hand, are more unpredictable. Remember how Graham will stop if you press the same direction? Graham will also stop if you press 5 on the numpad, right in the middle. But numpad 5 isn't tied to the 20 frames per second like everything else. So, with numpad 5, you can stop Graham faster than the 0.05 second window. This opens up more possibilities for routing, but YOLO zips are highly precise and luck-based, which make them very risky. With these major discoveries and developments, it was time for Santa to return. When I asked Santa about Robb, he told me, "I was happy to see a new high-level player with incredible skill and an even more scientific approach to the game than me. But it did always annoy me that I didn't have King's Quest 1, since it was the only AGI game I'd run and didn't have the record in. And also it's, well, King's Quest 1 and has prestige just by that fact." In July of 2023, Santa Claus was hungry for world records, from his previous personal best of 59 seconds to 50 seconds, and then on down to 46. Santa was working so hard, his finger literally began to bleed. When I asked Santa about these runs, he told me, "Robb had a lot of great ideas that he himself had never implemented in a run, and that I was slow to implement because either I was unaware of them or I did not believe in Robb's route. The irony of the routing progression is that I did loads of work on it, and in the end, an awful lot of it was just adding more of Robb's ideas in, one by one. As time went on, I made an effort to route out as much RNG as I could, seeking alternative zips and routes and accepting an extra keystroke or two if necessary. It's a progression towards less RNG and more YOLO." And after he earned a 46-second time, Santa Claus slowed his game down even more, from about 140,000 cycles to around 80,000 cycles. So obviously this loses time in a few places, but the slower speed meant that Santa Claus could try for riskier zips. For example, this one at the very end, which, if you do it wrong, sends you into the moat. Santa was getting 80 to 90% consistency on it in practice. He kept pushing and earned a 44.783. But it didn't have optimal RNG, and that bothered Santa. He rerouted a few zips from the mushroom to the leprechauns, and on August 5th, he wrote this about his attempts. "The whole session was very strange. It was basically an hour of eaten inputs, bad RNG, and me tilting, followed by this one run. I think this was my only finished run the whole day." Santa had earned a 43.65, and he wasn't satisfied. Of course, because when is Santa Claus ever really happy with his times? More micro-optimizations, like a YOLO stop in the Leprechaun's Hall, and what Santa called Pale YOLO, a way to do the falling animation from the bucket at full speed. It's a risky strat that saves about half a second with good execution, but it could also kill the run. And on August 7th, 2023, Santa Claus did this.
Why? Why dedicate this much time? Why dedicate? What is it that keeps drawing you back to it?
I mean, how can I answer it? It's just because I like it, right? It's like my way of having fun. Like, sorry if it sounds weird.
I'd like to thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Play for free on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation with the link in the description or pinned comment. If you're new or haven't played for 6 months, you'll get some bonus goodies. I'd like to give a big thanks to all my Patreon supporters and YouTube members, as well as the other members of the adventure game HOTSPOT network. You folks are amazing. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.